Be seated. Carmichael versus Mooney.
Are both parties ready?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Your Honor.
Are you Mrs. Carmichael or are you her attorney?
Yes.
Yes, what?
Yes, sir?
You misunderstood. I asked you whether you were Mrs. Carmichael or Mrs. Carmichael's attorney.
Oh. Your Honor, I'm both. I'm Mrs. Lucille Carmichael, and I am acting as my own attorney.
Very well. Mrs. Carmichael is bringing an action for injunction to abate a nuisance. Will the attorney for the plaintiff please call the first witness? Mrs. Carmichael, you are the plaintiff.
Oh. Your Honor, before I call my first witness, I should like to say that this is no ordinary squabble between two neighbors. Today, we are going to ask a question. Does one man have the right to destroy the peace of mind of an entire neighborhood? And I say to you, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the answer is no. No, 1,000 times no.
Mrs. Carmichael, there is no jury.
No jury?
Those are spectators. We usually have a jury in criminal cases.
Well, if keeping a person up half the night isn't a crime, I'd like to know what is.
Mrs. Carmichael, please call your first witness.
Yes, Your Honor. I call Mrs. Vivian Bagley.
Mrs. Vivian Bagley. Raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Be seated. Give the court your name and address, please.
Mrs. Vivian Bagley, 132 Post Road.
Now, Mrs. Bagley, will you tell the court, in your own words, the mental and physical anguish that you have experienced because this inconsiderate wretch has let his undisciplined beast yowl the entire night?
Well, I haven't been able to sleep at night. And the other morning, I overslept. And I missed the biggest sale that was ever on at Dee Dee's dress shop.
I didn't know Dee Dee had a sale.
Oh, yes, she had alligator bags at half price.
You're kidding.
Yeah, but they were all picked over. I know, they were all picked over when
I
got
have
there.
had a pair of alligator shoes for 6 months and have needed a bag.
Why don't you? I thought they were...
Mrs. Carmichael, this seems most irrelevant.
Yes.
Shall we get on with the testimony?
Yes, Your Honor. Mrs. Bagley.
Yes?
Would you care to tell us what happened last Thursday night?
Yes, well, last Thursday night, this dog was barking, and you and I...
Mrs. Bagley, will you be specific, please? Tell the court who you is.
I is Vivian Bagley.
I meant tell the court who went with you.
You did. Oh, Lucille Carmichael went with me.
Yes. Continue, please.
Last Thursday night, we heard this dog barking, and Lucille Carmichael and I went out to see if we could find it. And all of a sudden, we went down an alley, and we heard this dog barking nearby. And we went around a corner, and there sat Mr. Mooney's dog, Nelson, just as guilty as sin.
Your witness, Mr. Weitzman.
Mrs. Bagley, you said that you heard a dog bark, then you went around the corner, and you saw Nelson. Is that correct?
That is right.
Then you didn't actually see Nelson bark.
No, we didn't actually see him. But then, of
So
course...
actually, you don't know if it was Nelson barking. It could have been another dog entirely.
Yeah, it could have been,
No
but...
more questions.
The witness may step down.
You were a big help.
He's tricky.
Call your next witness.
I call Mrs. Lucille Carmichael to the stand.
Mrs. Lucille Carmichael. Raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
State your name and address, please.
Mrs. Lucille Carmichael, 132 Post Road. Now then, Mrs. Carmichael, have you ever sued any of your neighbors before? No. No, I never have. Would you say that normally you sleep very well? Oh, yes. Just like a log. Very well, then. Will you tell the court, in your own words, what took place last Thursday night? I would be very happy to tell the court.
Mrs. Carmichael, is it absolutely necessary to have this incessant jumping back and forth? You're making the bench nervous.
Well, Your Honor, if you don't mind, please, it makes it a lot easier for me to go back and forth like that, because then I can tell if I'm witnessing or plaintiffing.
Continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. What was that last question again? Tell the court, in your own words, what took place last Thursday night. Well, I was awakened around 2 o'clock in the morning by the barking of all the dogs who live in the neighborhood near our house, led off, as usual, by the ringleader. So my friend, Mrs. Bagley, and I went out to see if we couldn't find this beast, and we finally tracked him down. I see. And is the owner of that dog in the courtroom? Yes, he is. Will you point him out? That man there. Are you sure? I'm positive. Thank you. Your witness.
Mrs. Carmichael, you have testified that you made a long search of the entire neighborhood.
That's right.
Can you prove this?
Mrs. Bagley was with me every minute.
Then if you and Mrs. Bagley were together every minute, she was also with you when she heard the dog bark.
That is correct.
Then actually you didn't see who was doing the barking.
No, I certainly did
No
not.
more questions.
Wait a minute.
You may step down. Now, before we call the defense, do you have any more witnesses, Mrs. Carmichael?
Well, not at this time, Your Honor. Your Honor, I'd like to request a recess.
On what grounds?
I'd like to present some new evidence.
Very well. This court will recess for 1 hour.
Do you really have some new evidence?
No.
Then why did you ask for a recess?
Well, that's what Perry Mason always does when he gets in a jam.